It all began with what everyone around us called a perfect friendship. From the outside, we looked inseparable, two women who understood each other without words, who shared dreams, secrets, laughter, and even pain. She was the one who stood beside me on my wedding day, holding my veil and smiling brighter than anyone in the crowd. I thought it was out of love and joy, but perhaps now I realize it was the smile of someone already tasting what wasn't hers. Our bond was built over years of trust, of small moments that made me believe she was the sister I had chosen for myself. We spent nights talking about life, marriage, and happiness, and I used to tell her everything about my husband, how he made me feel safe, how we planned our future, and how I felt lucky to have both of them in my life. It was as if she was living my story through my words, memorizing every detail until it became her own. In those days, I never noticed the small signs, the lingering glances, the compliments that lasted a second too long. She would always praise him, saying I was lucky to have such a loving husband, and I would smile proudly, never realizing that her words carried a hidden hunger. She would visit often, bringing gifts, cooking for us, laughing with him as if she belonged in our home. I thought it was innocent friendship, but now I can see how carefully she wove herself into the fabric of our lives. She knew what I loved, what I feared, what made me weak. And while I trusted her completely, she was studying me quietly, learning how to replace me piece by piece. There were times when my husband would come home distracted, his phone constantly lighting up with messages he claimed were work-related. I never doubted him, I was too busy believing in the goodness of the people around me. I thought love meant trust, and I gave it freely to both of them. When I would ask her for advice, she would tell me to be patient, to not overthink, to keep my faith in him. She played the role of my co. Our friendship was the kind people envy, the kind that looks unbreakable. We celebrated birthdays together, shared family dinners, and stood by each other in every storm. She was the one I called when I cried, the one I ran to with my happiness. My family adored her, my husband respected her, and I treated her like part of my own soul. If someone had told me then that she would be the one to destroy my world, I would have laughed. Because betrayal like that doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the ones you love so deeply that you never think to guard your heart against them. There was a warmth in her voice that I mistook for sincerity, a kind of loyalty that seemed so pure it blinded me to the truth. She would ask about our marriage, our plans, how we spent our weekends. I thought it was normal curiosity, but now I see she was collecting every detail, preparing herself for the day she would take my place. I remember one evening when she stayed over after dinner. We talked late into the night, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes, saying how lucky I was to have a man who adored me. I hugged her, not realizing those tears were not for me, they were for what she couldn't have yet. She became a part of every memory I hold from those years. Every photo, every gathering, every smile, she's there, standing beside me, pretending to celebrate my happiness while secretly craving it for herself. There were moments when I caught her staring at him, a look that I brushed off as harmless admiration. My husband would sometimes mention her in passing, saying how kind she was, how helpful. I felt proud of our friendship then, proud that the people I loved got along so well. It never once crossed my mind that behind those friendly exchanges, a forbidden connection was slowly being born. The poison didn't spread overnight. It started with small doses, innocent gestures, unspoken emotions, moments that seemed meaningless until they became too powerful to ignore. She began call. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about how lucky I was to have both of them in my life. The two people who made me feel complete, who always supported me. I didn't realize that while I was sleeping peacefully, messages were being exchanged, promises were being whispered in the dark, and the foundation of my marriage was being quietly stolen. There's something cruel about betrayal that grows in silence. It gives you no warning, no signs loud enough to hear until it's too late. But before it all came crashing down, there was still a part of me that adored her like before. I would buy her gifts, share my joys, and ask for her advice when my marriage felt distant. She would always say, "Men get busy, don't worry, he loves you." And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her. She was my closest friend, my chosen family. She was supposed to protect me, not destroy me. Every betrayal begins with a bond that feels unbreakable, and ours was exactly that. The perfect friendship, until it wasn't. The kind that everyone around us admired, the kind that looked like it could never end. But behind the laughter, the shared tears, and the trust, she was quietly rewriting the story of my life, turning herself from friend to thief, from comfort to chaos. And I, too blinded by love to see the truth, kept handing her every piece of my world, not knowing that soon, she would use it all against me. It started slowly, like a whisper in the dark, something that hid itself behind everyday smiles and polite gestures. The hidden affair behind my back wasn't born out of passion in a single moment, it grew in the silence of trust one had built between them. She had become a part of our daily lives, a familiar presence in our home, someone my husband respected, someone I adored. Their connection began with simple things, shared jokes during dinners, conversations that seemed harmless, glances that lasted a second too long but never enough to seem suspect. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about how lucky I was to have both of them in my life. The two people who made me feel complete, who always supported me. I didn't realize that while I was sleeping peacefully, messages were being exchanged, promises were being whispered in the dark, and the foundation of my marriage was being quietly stolen. There's something cruel about betrayal that grows in silence. It gives you no warning, no signs loud enough to hear until it's too late. But before it all came crashing down, there was still a part of me that adored her like before. I would buy her gifts, share my joys, and ask for her advice when my marriage felt distant. She would always say, "Men get busy, don't worry, he loves you." And I believed her, because why wouldn't I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her. She was my closest friend, my chosen family. She was supposed to protect me, not destroy me. Every betrayal begins with a bond that feels unbreakable, and ours was exactly that. The perfect friendship, until it wasn't. The kind that everyone around us admired, the kind that looked like it could never end. But behind the laughter, the shared tears, and the trust, she was quietly rewriting the story of my life, turning herself from friend to thief, from comfort to chaos. And I, too blinded by love to see the truth, kept handing her every piece of my world, not knowing that soon, she would use it all against me. It started slowly, like a whisper in the dark, something that hid itself behind everyday smiles and polite gestures. The hidden affair behind my back wasn't born out of passion in a single moment, it grew in the silence of trust one had built between them. She had become a part of our daily lives, a familiar presence in our home, someone my husband respected, someone I adored. Their connection began with simple things, shared jokes during dinners, conversations that seemed harmless, glances that lasted a second too long but never enough to seem suspicious. I was too busy being grateful for a happy marriage, too proud of the bond we all shared, to notice that something dangerous had started taking shape right before my eyes. There were moments when I should have known. Late-night texts he brushed off as work, perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine, the sudden distance between us that he blamed on exhaustion. When I asked her if she noticed anything strange about him, she smiled and said I was overthinking, that men sometimes pull away but it doesn't mean they stop loving you. I trusted her words because I believed she wanted the best for me. I didn't know she was the reason he was drifting away, that she had already filled the space I was trying so hard to keep alive. She used to look at me with those sympathetic eyes, the kind that said she understood my pain, while she was the one causing it. She played the role of my savior, pretending to help me fix my marriage, while she was quietly enjoying its destruction. And he, weak and selfish, fell deeper into her web. I used to think our home was built on love, but it turns out it was built on my trust, and that's exactly what they used to tear it apart. The hardest part was realizing how easily they hid it. There were no dramatic fights, no confrontations at first. Just distance. Just emptiness where warmth used to be. I'd wake up to find him already gone for work, come home to find him buried in his phone. I would ask him if he was happy, and he'd force a smile and say yes. But his eyes told another story, a story I was too afraid to read. She was always there, always available, always saying the right things to make him feel seen. While I was busy holding the pieces of our life together, she was giving him the illusion of freedom. When the truth began to surface, it didn't come through confessions or guilt, it came through patterns. Missed calls, sudden trips, small lies that didn't add up. My heart wanted to deny it, but my soul already knew. The woman I had loved like a sister had turned my husband into her secret lover, and together they had built a world of lies that stood on the ruins of my faith. The realization hit me like cold water. I had been living in a story where everyone knew the ending except me. Sometimes I wonder how they justified it to themselves. Did they tell each other it was love? Did they convince themselves that I would never find out? Or did they simply not care about the damage they were causing? Maybe betrayal doesn't need a reason, it just needs opportunity and desire. And she had both. Every time she looked at me, she saw what she wanted to steal. Every time she came to my home, she stepped deeper into a life that wasn't hers to live. She didn't just take my husband, she took my peace, my faith in friendship, my sense of safety. There were nights when I sat alone, trying to make sense of it all. I replayed every moment, every laugh, every conversation, wondering where I went wrong. I asked myself if I was not enough, if I had somehow pushed him into her arms. That's what betrayal does. It makes you blame yourself for the sins of others. But deep down, I knew the truth wasn't about my war. I remember the day I finally saw it, the undeniable proof, something so small yet so powerful that it shattered every illusion I had left. It was in his phone, a message, her name glowing on the screen, words that didn't belong between friends. My hands shook, my chest burned, but I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence is the only thing left when pain becomes too heavy to scream. The world around me blurred, every memory twisting into something unfamiliar. The people I trusted most had turned into strangers wearing familiar faces. After that day, I started watching them differently. Every word, every gesture, every moment between them carried a new meaning. I could see how she lit up when he entered the room, how he unconsciously smiled when he saw her. They thought they were clever, that their secret was safe. But once betrayal touches you, it changes the way you see everything. I became an observer in my own life, a silent witness to the love story that bloomed out of my pain. And through it all, I stayed quiet, holding my emotions like a weapon, knowing that someday, their perfect illusion would collapse under the weight of its own lies. Because no matter how well someone hides their sin, the truth always finds a way to breathe. And when it does, it burns everything in its path. It was a normal evening, or at least it seemed like one. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange, and I remember standing by the window, waiting for him to come home, believing that the world I lived in was still whole. I had spent the day preparing his favorite meal, trying to fix the distance that had been growing silently between us. My heart still clung to hope, still believed that love could fix what I didn't yet understand was already broken. The house smelled of warmth and comfort, but beneath it, something cold was waiting to reveal itself. That night would become the turning point, the night I discovered the truth that shattered every illusion I had carefully built around love, friendship, and trust. He came home later than usual, looking distracted, almost nervous, though he tried to hide it behind a tired smile. His phone was in his hand the entire time, his eyes flicking toward it like he was expecting something urgent. I remember asking him if everything was all right, and he nodded quickly, almost too quickly. There was a strange energy in the air, a tension that I couldn't name. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe I was overthinking, just as she always told me. But something inside me refused to stay quiet that night. There was a whisper in my gut, a feeling that had been building for weeks, begging me to look closer. After dinner, he stepped outside to take a call. I could hear his voice faintly through the door, soft, low, different. There was a tenderness in his tone that used to belong to me. I stood there frozen, every sound amplified, the beating of my heart, the creak of the floor, the soft hum of betrayal finding its voice. I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to give shape to the fear that was clawing at me. But then I heard her name. Not as a friend, not as a sister, but as something more, something forbidden. He said her name the way a man says it when he's in love. My world cracked in that instant, though I kept my face calm when he returned. He looked at me, unaware that I had just heard enough to destroy everything we were. I smiled, I nodded, I pretended. I needed to be sure, needed proof before my heart could accept what my ears had already known. That night, after he fell asleep, I took his phone in trembling hands. My fingers felt heavy, as if even the air was warning me not to go further. But once you taste doubt, it becomes impossible to ignore. The screen lit up, and there it was, a message from her. Words of affection, plans to meet, confessions that dripped with the same sweetness he once gave to me. Each line cut deeper than the last, every, "I miss you," a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I scrolled through their conversations in disbelief, my tears falling onto the screen, blurring the words that had already blurred my reality. They spoke of me, of how I wouldn't understand, of how their connection was meant to be. She told him she felt alive around him, and he told her he had never felt more understood. I wanted to scream, to break the phone, to wake him up and demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the betrayal that had been living in my house, eating at my happiness, wearing the face of friendship. The hours that followed felt endless. I walked around the house, touching the things we had built together, the photos on the walls, the wedding picture where she stood beside me as my maid of honor. How could someone smile so beautifully while already plotting to take what wasn't hers? I remembered every moment I had shared with her, the late-night talks, the laughter, the advice she gave me when my marriage began to crumble. Every word now sounded like poison, every gesture like a calculated move. The realization burned through me until I could barely breathe. The next morning, I woke up before him. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that screams louder than noise. I watched him sleeping peacefully, the man I had loved with everything I had, the man who had given his heart to another woman. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was an aching emptiness. Love doesn't vanish the moment betrayal arrives, it lingers, confused and broken, trying to understand what went wrong. When he finally woke up, he smiled and kissed my forehead as if nothing had changed. Maybe for him, it hadn't. But for me, the world had already turned upside down. That day, I saw her too. She came to visit like she always did, pretending to be the same friend she'd always been. I remember looking at her face, wondering how I had missed the truth for so long. She hugged me, and I could smell her perfume, the same scent I had found on his shirt a few nights before. My body froze, my heart screamed, but my face stayed calm. I watched the two of them exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. It was subtle, but once your eyes are open, you can never unsee. There was a language between them now, one made of silence and stolen moments. I played along. I served tea, I smiled, I laughed. I became an actress in my own life, hiding the storm that was tearing me apart inside. Every word she spoke sounded like a lie, every laugh like mockery. She talked about her job, her family, her plans, pretending nothing had changed, pretending she wasn't sleeping with my husband. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come with guilt. Some people carry it proudly, like a twisted form of power. And she did. She wore her deception like perfume, confident that I would never notice. When she left, I closed the door behind her and let my tears fall freely. There was no strength left to hold them back. I didn't confront anyone that day. I needed time to process, to breathe, to gather myself. The truth had finally revealed itself, but with it came 1,000 new questions. Why? How long? Was it love, or was it just the thrill of taking something that wasn't hers? I thought about every promise he ever made, every vow we exchanged, and wondered if any of it had ever been real. In the days that followed, I watched them carefully. I became aware of every detail, every movement, every change in tone. They still tried to hide it, still believed they were smarter than me. But now I was no longer blind. The pieces began to fall into place, his sudden work trips, her unexplained absences, the lies they told to cover their tracks. I began to see how skillfully they had built their secret, how they had used my trust as their shield. One night, I saw them together. It wasn't planned. I had gone out to clear my mind, and there they were, standing in the dim light of a cafe on the other side of town. They weren't touching, but they didn't need to. The way they looked at each other said it all. My chest tightened, my breath caught, but I didn't cry this time. I just watched, calm and still, as the truth I had already known unfolded before my eyes. It was both devastating and freeing. Because in that moment, I realized I didn't need to question anymore. The truth was no longer hidden, it was standing right in front of me, and it had my husband's face and my best friend's smile. When the truth came crashing down on me, it felt like my world had been pulled out from under my feet. For days, I couldn't breathe without feeling the sting of betrayal in my chest. The nights were the hardest, the silence would press against my ears until it felt unbearable. I kept replaying everything in my mind, every word they had said, every laugh we had shared, every time I ignored. There were mornings when I couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of betrayal made it hard to even exist. My hands would shake when I tried to make coffee, my mind drifting to their messages, their secret meetings, their shared laughter that used to be mine. I would sit on the edge of the bed and stare at nothing, the memories playing like ghosts in the room. It was strange how everything around me still looked the same, the walls, the furniture, the photos, but nothing felt the same anymore. Each corner of the house carried a reminder of them. The couch where she once sat and talked about loyalty, the kitchen where he kissed me before leaving, the mirror that now reflected a stranger I didn't recognize. Grief and anger fought inside me constantly. Some days I cried until I couldn't breathe, other days I stared blankly into space, too numb to feel anything at all. My mind was a battlefield, torn between love that refused to die and pain that refused to fade. I wanted to hate them, but my heart wasn't ready. It still searched for reasons, still clung to the smallest hope that maybe it was all a mistake, maybe he had been confused, maybe she hadn't meant to hurt me. But deep down, I knew there was no mistake. What they did was a choice, every message, every meeting, every lie. And realizing that choice broke something in me that I didn't think could ever be fixed. I stopped talking to people for a while. I didn't want to explain, didn't want the pity, didn't want anyone to see how broken I had become. I carried the secret like a wound under my clothes, pretending everything was fine. But pretending has its limits. One evening, while standing in front of the mirror, I caught my own reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were empty, her face pale, her smile gone. It was in that moment I realized I was mourning not just the betrayal but also the death of the person I used to be. The woman who believed in forever, who believed in friends, who Belle. I began writing in a notebook, pouring everything out, the anger, the sorrow, the confusion. Each word felt like bleeding through ink. I didn't write for forgiveness or revenge, I wrote because I needed to find myself again in the chaos. Slowly, through the pages, I started to see the truth about pain. It doesn't destroy you instantly, it reshapes you, forces you to rebuild from the ashes of what was lost. But before rebuilding, I had to fall completely. And I did. There were days I didn't eat, days I couldn't stop crying, nights when I screamed into a pillow because the pain was too much to carry quietly. I avoided places that reminded me of them. I stopped going to our favorite cafe, stopped watching the shows we used to watch, stopped listening to the songs that once felt like love but now felt like knives. Even silence had their voices in it. I could hear them laughing, whispering, betraying me all over again in my mind. I felt trapped in memories I didn't want anymore. But the cruelest part of betrayal is that it teaches you how alone you truly are. It strips away illusions until only the truth remains, and the truth was that no one was coming to save me this time. And yet, even in my brokenness, something inside me refused to die. A tiny spark of strength kept whispering that I couldn't let them win. I didn't know how to rise again, but I knew I had to. I started by taking small steps, getting out of bed, cleaning the house, cooking for myself, looking out the window instead of at the past. Each simple act became a quiet rebellion against the pain. I began to notice the sunlight again, the sound of birds in the morning, the softness of the wind. Life hadn't stopped, even though mine felt like it had. The first time I saw them together after knowing the truth, something changed inside me. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't fall apart. I just watched them, realizing that the power they once had over me was fading. They looked smaller, almost pathetic. I began to see her differently too. The woman who once held all my trust now looked like a shadow of her former self. I didn't hate her anymore, I pitied her. Because a person who steals someone else's happiness will never truly have their own. As for him, his apologies, when they finally came, felt empty. There are some wounds that, I'm sorry, can't touch. I didn't respond with anger. I simply looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him not as the man who betrayed me, but as someone I no longer needed. And that realization was powerful. Because in losing them, I found something greater, clarity. I began to understand that falling apart isn't the end of the story. It's the breaking open of everything false, the painful process of making room for something real. I wasn't the same woman who once believed love could conquer all. I was stronger, wiser, quieter, and far more dangerous than they ever expected. Falling apart had stripped away everything unnecessary, leaving behind only the truth of who I really was. And from that truth, I began to rise again, slowly, deliberately, with fire in my heart and calm in my soul. The silence after betrayal is louder than any scream. It sits in the air, thick and suffocating, wrapping around every thought until all you can hear is the echo of what they did to you. For a long time, I lived in that silence, lost between anger and numbness, unsure of what to feel or how to move forward. People often say revenge is born from hatred, but for me, it didn't come from hate, it came from pain, from the unbearable weight of being made a fool by the very people I loved most. I didn't want to hurt anyone at first. I just wanted answers, justice, maybe an apology that could ease the sting. But as days turned into nights filled with endless replaying of their lies, something inside me shifted. The pain that once crushed me began to harden into resolve. I decided I would no longer be their victim. I would no longer cry for people who celebrat. I started by reclaiming myself. I knew that the first step to destroying their illusion was to become everything they thought they had broken. So, I stopped reacting. I stopped crying in front of them, stopped asking questions, stopped showing pain. I began to smile again, not out of happiness, but out of power. I could see their confusion when I didn't behave like the betrayed woman they expected me to be. My silence made them uneasy. They didn't know if I knew, didn't know if I was planning something, didn't know how much longer their secret would stay safe. And that uncertainty was my weapon. She tried to keep up her act, pretending to be my friend, pretending that nothing had changed between us. I let her. I played along, answering her messages with warmth, inviting her over, letting her think I was still blind. Every time she looked at me, I could see her guilt flicker for a second, and then disappear behind her fake smile. But guilt always cracks the surface eventually. I just had to wait. Patience became my greatest strength. While she thought she was manipulating me, I was watching her, learning her patterns, understanding her fears. My husband, too, grew distant in his own guilt. He avoided eye contact, avoided conversations that lasted too long, avoided the intimacy that once connected us. He thought his lies were still safe behind locked phones and fabricated stories. But lies rot from the inside, and I could already see the decay. He began to trip over his own words, forget what he had said before, grow restless when I stayed too quiet. I noticed how he'd look at his phone and quickly turn it face down, how he would leave the room when messages came in, how he'd flinch when her name appeared unexpectedly. He didn't realize I already knew everything. I wanted him to believe he was still in control, because that illusion was the only thing keeping him comfortable enough to slip up. My plan wasn't built on rage. Rage is loud, messy, and short-lived. In the meantime, I began rebuilding my life quietly. I reconnected with people I had lost touch with, focused on work, on my appearance, on my strength. The more I grew, the more their power over me faded. She began to notice first. The friend she once pitied now seemed untouchable, glowing even in silence. I could see her discomfort when others praised me, when she realized she was no longer the center of the story. The guilt she once buried beneath her confidence started surfacing in small ways: nervous laughter, restless glances, subtle defensiveness. She was breaking long before I ever made my move. My husband's behavior changed too. He became more attentive, suddenly full of affection and apologies wrapped in meaningless words. Perhaps he felt me slipping away, perhaps he sensed the calm before the storm. It was almost amusing to watch him try to rebuild what he had already destroyed, pretending as though love could erase betrayal. I let him try. I responded with politeness but never warmth, with smiles but never softness. He didn't understand that the woman he had betrayed was gone. In her place stood someone he could no longer manipulate. The moment I chose to act wasn't planned, it simply came when everything inside me aligned. I invited her over one evening, just like old times. She came, pretending to care, her voice dripping with false concern. We sat together, just like we used to, drinking tea, exchanging meaningless talk. Then, with calmness she didn't expect, I placed my phone on the table and played a recording of one of their conversations. The color drained from her face instantly. She froze, her hands trembling, her mask cracking right in front of me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't insult her. I just looked at her in silence. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon, it forces the guilty to confront their reflection. She stammered, tried to explain, tried to deny, but the more she spoke, the deeper she sank. Later that night, I showed him the same truth. His excuses came tumbling out in panic, his guilt spilling everywhere like broken glass. But I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg. I simply watched him crumble under the weight of his own actions. The power that betrayal once had over me vanished in that moment. They had taken everything from me, but what they couldn't take was my dignity. I walked away from both of them without a word, leaving behind the ruins they had created. My revenge wasn't in destroying them, it was in refusing to let them destroy me. And yet, the irony of it all was that once I stopped caring, their worlds began to fall apart on their own. She lost the calm she once carried, paranoia replaced her confidence. He lived with the guilt that shadowed every breath he took. I didn't need to lift a hand. Their punishment was built into the choices they made. People often think revenge is about inflicting pain, but true revenge is quieter than that. It's standing tall when they expected you to stay broken. It's reclaiming your voice when they tried to silence you. It's smiling when they can't find peace in their own hearts. I learned that revenge doesn't always come in the form of fire, sometimes, it comes as silence, as strength, as grace. Because nothing unsettles the guilty more than the calm of the person they couldn't destroy. With every passing day, I watched them unravel further, their lies turning against them, their trust in each other dissolving into fear and suspicion. What once looked like a perfect affair began to rot from within. The same deception that united them became the poison that separated them. And while they fell apart, I rebuilt myself, piece by piece, until the woman who once cried in the dark became the woman who no longer needed them or their apologies. The day everything came to light, I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes after surviving a storm so fierce it nearly tears you apart. Everyone had thought they knew how my story would end. They whispered behind my back, pitying the woman who lost her husband, mocking the one who was too naive to see betrayal coming. They thought I would stay broken, that my pain would define me forever. But they were wrong. Because what they didn't know was that I had written a different ending, one they would never forget. The ending that wasn't born from rage, but from wisdom earned through heartbreak. She had stolen my husband, yes. She had stolen my peace, my trust, my sense of safety. For a while, I let her think she had also stolen my future. But the truth was, she had only freed me, from illusions, from fake love, from the kind of people who wore masks of loyalty while stabbing me in the back. The day she believed she won was the day she unknowingly set herself on a path that would expose every secret she had tried to bury. I didn't seek to destroy her, I simply let the truth do what it does best, reveal itself when the time is right. The truth began to unfold like a slow-burning fire. It started when people around us began to notice the inconsistencies, the cracks in her perfect act. Her stories never matched, her behavior shifted from confidence to fear. She could no longer keep track of the lies she told. I didn't have to expose her, life began doing it for me. Every person she manipulated turned against her, every secret she hid began surfacing. She had built her world on deceit, and deceit always demands payment. I just stood there, watching as her own actions pulled her down. The man she took from me, the one she thought would complete her, became her biggest punishment. The same flaws she once ignored in him began to haunt her. The lies he told me, he now told her. The excuses he once used on me became hers to hear. I used to cry over his betrayal. People started talking again, but this time, their words were different. The same ones who pitied me before now looked at me with admiration. They saw how I had risen quietly, how I carried myself with strength instead of spite. They saw how I didn't need to shout for revenge because the truth had already become my voice. She couldn't handle it, the way I stood unshaken, the way her victory turned into ashes in her hands. Her pride had been built on comparison, on being the woman who won. But how could she feel victorious when the one she hurt no longer cared, when the life she stole began to feel like a curse she couldn't escape? I started to see it in her eyes whenever we crossed paths. The confidence she once wore like armor was gone, replaced by regret that she tried to hide but couldn't. She avoided my gaze, her smile trembling, her words unsure. The same woman who had once gloated in silence now couldn't stand in the same room as me without breaking inside. And he, my former husband, looked like a man haunted by ghosts he couldn't silence. Every time he saw me, he tried to speak, to explain, to apologize. But there was nothing left for him to say. His betrayal had written its own ending, one he couldn't undo no matter how much he wished he could. The shock that followed came not from what I did, but from what I didn't do. People expected a fight, a scandal, a dramatic confrontation. But I gave them none of that. My silence was louder than any outburst could have been. I didn't destroy her reputation, she did that herself when her lies began to clash with reality. I didn't ruin his life, he did that by choosing deceit over love. I simply let time take its course. And when the truth finally stood bare for everyone to see, it was more powerful than any revenge I could have planned. The day the world learned about their betrayal, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, even grateful. Because if they hadn't betrayed me, I would never have found the strength that lived Q. She once took pride in stealing what was mine, but now she had nothing that truly belonged to her. Her relationships were built on fear, not trust. Her nights were filled with anxiety, not peace. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw not victory, but the reflection of a woman who destroyed herself trying to destroy someone else. And he, the man who once thought he could play both sides, ended up alone, stuck between guilt and regret, watching the woman he underestimated become stronger than ever. What shocked everyone most wasn't that they fell apart, it was how I rose. They expected bitterness, but found grace. They expected a broken woman, but saw someone radiant with peace. They expected hatred, but saw detachment. And that was my final act of power, showing them that I didn't need to fight for revenge when life itself had balanced the scales for me. People around me began to understand that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet resilience, the ability to smile when your world has been burned to the ground because you've already learned how to build again. The same ones who betrayed me ended up trapped in the web they created, unable to escape the consequences of their own choices. I didn't need to lift a finger. Every lie became a thread in their downfall, every moment of deceit a knot tightening around them. All I had to do was stay still, silent, and true to myself. In the end, their greatest punishment wasn't my anger, it was watching me live freely while they remained prisoners of their guilt. When people heard my story, they couldn't believe how it ended. They had expected tears, despair, maybe revenge that left scars. But what they got instead was a quiet victory, the kind that leaves everyone speechless. I walked away with nothing but my peace, and somehow, that was everything. They lost the very thing they tried to steal from me, dignity, love, and self-respect. Their downfall was not because I fought them, but because they fought against